ufocenter.com, ufocenter.com, and from that homepage you can access our database of cases right from the top of the homepage, and they're listed by the date of occurrence, so you can date and time of occurrence. So you can just access the report for 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the 25th of November. They can read the witness's actual eyewitness report.
Wow. All right. And Bill, how about you giving us your the address and how to get a hold of your site as well?
URL to get to my site is, of course, www.ufosnw.com, and you get to my site. And I have another UFO blog called UFO Sightings Montana, which just caters to Montana UFO reports. Is a separate blog, but those two sites are linked up anyhow. But if you just want Montana reports, go to www.ufosightingsmontana.com. And Peter's talking about these orange and red orbs, and I think too many people have been kind of jumped the gun on these and said they're all Chinese lanterns, and well, some of them maybe are, but in cases like what Peter just described there, that's not the case. Obviously, I mean, no one's there to launch them, and we launched some Chinese lanterns last summer at my nephew's wedding, and they can look somewhat strange and everything, but they move slowly and they go out and they didn't tend to appear in one part of the sky and disappear in another part of the sky. You can pretty much exclude them in a lot of cases, but Peter's talking about something coming out of the sand, and I had an interesting report here the other day, an old report from Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, from a veteran, and people can go to that case on my site, just essentially put in Gitmo or Cuba search, and you'll find the case. But it happened in he was not sure, thinking that between August 1973 and November 74, but essentially this military person, he was a corporal, was working in the border tower next to the old base commander base, and said it was getting close to dusk, and he noticed from his tower that the water on the backside of his tower started changing colors. A UFO surface hovered and then departed after a brief period. He claims that the naval radar located on the leeward side of Gitmo confirmed the sighting, and the UFO was gone before the jets were scrambled. And he knows some other people that saw this object. I haven't called any of them yet, got in touch with them, but anyhow, I thought that was an interesting case. I mean, I've had a number of military cases over the years, some of them in there at Noster, Missouri, at Whiteman Air Force Base, 2 separate cases. I mean, they had nuclear weapons stored there, and very, very compelling cases. But this is the most interesting, or at least recent interesting case I've had from military, and they're at Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and claims that, it was detected by naval radar. But this thing came out of the water and went into the air, which, of course, some UFOs do that. A lot of them out of Catalina Island there in California, have been sighted. And one of the best cases I ever had, it was a photo of a flying disc, and that was down there at Dana Point, California. I think it was in March of 2007, and this guy saw this. He was walking in the morning hours, it was a daytime sighting, saw this disc-shaped object flying very rapidly, and then it just hovered, stopped and hovered, and he snapped a photo of it. Very good photograph, and I've had a number of people analyze that photograph, and they thought it was a real deal. So anyhow, some of these cases kind of stick out in my mind, very compelling, but this one was a recent, report, but an old report. Unfortunately, with old reports, and Peter knows this, not much you can do with them. You know, you can post them and maybe get comments on them, and but try to gather data for them. Maybe you can find newspaper articles in some cases, but generally not a whole lot you can do with them other than kind of ruminate over them and say, yeah, they're really interesting cases. But certainly military people are quite credible. Anyhow, that case kind of is a recent one that I got that kind of caught my eye.
Yeah. Well, yeah. As a matter of fact, that brings up a question for you, Peter. You do get a lot of reports coming in from all over the country in different parts of the world, but have you gotten reports of UFOs in proximity of large bodies of water, the ocean, or coming in or going out of those bodies of water?
Absolutely, and it calls to mind a report I received from an airline pilot who flies for a major U.S. airline. He was in, I believe, Acapulco. People can look at this report. I don't remember the year. I think it was 2005 or maybe more recent than that. And he was in a motel room. He was on the 4th or 5th floor of his hotel with his fiancée, and they were looking out over the water, and they saw 6 or 8 red lights come out of the water and rise into the night sky and disappear from sight. People can access that report here in a moment. I'll try to find it on our website, try to find the date, but I get reports of objects in or near or coming out of bodies of water on a fairly regular basis. So they obviously have figured out that they can conceal themselves fairly readily in a body of water.
Yeah, that
would be my interpretation anyway.
I would, and you would. It kind of makes sense that if they're indeed being able to travel so swiftly through the air without creating, sound waves, shock waves, or any kind of noise, they could probably do the same thing underwater with that medium as well. I don't know. Matter of fact, I think I've heard of reports where these things come in and out of water, and sometimes they don't even make a splash when they do so. And Bill, out there in your less populated neck of the woods there in Montana, I'll bet there are lots of lakes and bodies of water that have figured into various sighting reports as well that you might have received.
Well, I haven't had any direct reports of here in Montana of UFOs coming out of the water, but and Peter probably knows this too, some of the best UFO reports I've ever got have been in very remote areas, and there was one up here in Montana that came to MUFON. Of course, I'm now director for MUFON for Montana. Jan just appointed me here a few months ago. I was director a few years ago. But there was a photo taken, and it was one of these people just taking photos, and not just scenic photos. It was up in Glacier Park. Very interesting photo. I definitely don't think it's a bird or an insect or anything or any sort of lens flare or other anomaly. I think it's a real object. And I believe that was, I'm trying to page through my sites here to find that, but it was, I think, last summer is when that case happened, and I looked at it and said, yeah, that's pretty compelling, and it was in Glacier Park, and
yeah,
it looked like sort of a disc-shaped object. But anyhow, that one kind of stuck out. I've had other reports of one in Washington State. There was a retired Forest Service worker, and I actually walked up there, or not walked, drove up, and then walked where he saw the object and took videos and everything. And this happened about 10 or 12 years before that, and he said he had just had coronary bypass surgery, and he drove up this logging road. This is southwest of Olympia, and he was walking, and all of a sudden, right dead ahead of him, probably more than 20 feet, a disc-shaped object right on the road. And he said this thing hovered and then shot straight up, and something fell off it, and he could hear it glancing off the trees and everything. He never could find what it was, but, you know, I interviewed this guy. He's a PhD, for gosh sakes, you know, very credible witness, and this is right out in the middle of nowhere, but right in the daytime. And I actually drove my Infinity G up that road. I wound up doing a lot of damage to my car, but it was almost worth it to drive up there to see where he saw this thing. But that was right out in the middle of nowhere. But here in Montana, you know, I haven't had any super compelling reports, but, you know, Montana's sparsely populated, you know, and there's only certain times of the year where people are outside. So, you know, you just normally people don't see things. But
well,
you know,
Peter, was it Montana that you had that report of the elk being abducted by a saucer, or where was that? That was in
Washington State.
That was Washington State, and it was about 25 miles west of Mount St. Helens. That is a fascinating report.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and relate that one?
Yeah, I think it was 1998, if I recall, about February of 98, 15 forestry workers who were on a hillside planting seedling trees to restore an area that had been logged were just about to break for lunch. It was just 1 or 2 minutes before noon, and the foreman of the group had stood up and pulled his whistle out of his pocket because the group was fairly well dispersed across the hillside. And as he was preparing to blow his whistle, he looked to the east, and he saw an object that at first he thought was a canopy parachute. I'm not sure of the exact term, but it's rectangular. And then he quickly realized that this object was coming towards them, towards the workers, and it was hugging the nap of the earth. And the long story short is it went right up to a herd of elk that these forestry workers had been watching all day long feed down below them in a valley. And this object went right up to the herd. The herd broke for heavy timber except for one animal that trotted off away from the herd. And the object streaked right up above, they think it was a female elk, a cow elk, and lifted it off the ground, and the animal just went limp instantly. The object then moved slowly towards some trees where the herd of elk had hidden itself, taken cover, and it bumped into a tree as if it was overloaded, overgrossed, and it backed off away from the tree. It executed a 360-degree turn, climbing turn, and then it put the afterburners on and just streaked over the ridge to the north. That is a case I usually talk about during public presentations. It's a very, very interesting case.
Oh, my goodness.
I remember when you talked about that case. Yeah, that was exciting.
And Bob Fairfax, who is the state head field investigator for the state of for MUFON in the state of Washington, did a thorough investigation, took statements from the 15 witnesses, and wrote an article for the MUFON UFO Journal.
Oh, for that case.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. Now, maybe let me clarify this, Peter. You're saying that the craft, the saucer, or whatever shape it was, actually bumped into the tree after it had the elk inside the object, or was this kind of still having the elk dangling below it and bumping into the tree?
Well, good question. And the elk actually was sucked up into the ventral surface of the craft and disappeared from the sight of the witnesses. Wow. So I would say the elk was aboard that craft when all of this happened.
Now, isn't that